Marcus Chun had always been different from other humans. While his fellow soldiers celebrated each alien kill with cheers and drinks, Marcus felt a heavy weight in his chest. The Third Galactic War had been raging for 8 years now, and humanity was losing badly. The Draconian Empire controlled most of the galaxy, their massive dragon-like beings crushing human colonies one by one. The morning sun cast long shadows across the rocky terrain of Kepler 442b as Marcus adjusted his plasma rifle. His squad of 12 men crouched behind jagged boulders, waiting for orders from command. The air smelled of sulfur and burned metal from yesterday's battle. Bodies of both humans and Draconians littered the battlefield below. "Chun, you see anything?" whispered Sergeant Rodriguez through the comm unit. His voice cracked with exhaustion. They'd been fighting for 3 straight days with little food or sleep. Marcus peered through his scope at the valley below. The Draconian forward base sprawled across what used to be New Houston, a thriving human settlement of 50,000 people. Now was nothing but twisted metal and ash. Massive dragon-shaped ships dotted the landscape like sleeping giants. "Negative, Sarge." "Wait." Marcus focused his scope on movement near a crashed human transport. "I see something." A small figure moved between the wreckage. At first, Marcus thought it might be a survivor from the human settlement. But as he adjusted his scope, his blood ran cold. It was a young Draconian, probably just a hatchling based on its size. The creature was wounded, leaving a trail of golden blood as it struggled to reach cover. "It's a dragon," Marcus reported. "Looks injured. Maybe we can capture it for intel." "Negative," Rodriguez replied sharply. "Orders are to eliminate all hostiles on sight. Take the shot." Marcus lined up his crosshairs with the small dragon's head. His finger rested on the trigger. One squeeze, and another alien would be dead. One less enemy to worry about. But something made him pause. The young Draconian had stopped moving. It collapsed beside a piece of debris, its small chest rising and falling rapidly. Even through his scope, Marcus could see fear in its large, intelligent eyes. This wasn't a soldier or a warrior. It was just a child, lost and afraid. "Chin, what's your status?" Rodriguez's voice grew impatient. "Working on it, Sarge." Marcus kept his rifle trained on the target, but his hands began to shake. He had killed plenty of adult Draconians in combat, but they had always been trying to kill him too. This was different. The small dragon tried to stand, but fell again. A piece of shrapnel stuck out from its left wing, and burns covered much of its silver scales. It made a soft, whimpering sound that reminded Marcus of the puppies his family used to raise back on Earth. "Chun," Rodriguez hissed. "Take the shot now, or I'll do it myself." Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, thinking about his sister Sarah. She had been a veterinarian before the war, always helping wounded animals. She would tell him that all life was precious, even alien life. Sarah had died when the Draconians bombed Earth's hospitals, but her words still echoed in his mind. As they walked past the wreckage where the young Draconian had hidden, Marcus saw no sign of the creature. Maybe it had found shelter. Maybe it would survive. He hoped so. 3 days later, Command relocated Marcus's unit to the front lines of Proxima Centauri. The fighting there was brutal. Human forces were surrounded and running out of supplies. For weeks, they held defensive positions against wave after wave of Draconian attacks. During a brief lull in the fighting, Marcus sat alone in his foxhole, cleaning his rifle. The war seemed endless. Every day brought news of another human world falling to the dragons. Earth itself was under siege, its population hiding in underground bunkers while alien ships blocked out the sun. A rustling sound made Marcus look up. Something moved in the darkness beyond the perimeter. He raised his weapon, expecting another night attack. Instead, a familiar small figure emerged from the shadows. It was the young dragon he had spared on Kepler 442b. But how was that possible? This battle was taking place light years away from where he had seen the creature. Dragons could fly through space, but surely not a wounded hatchling. The small Draconian approached slowly, its hands raised in what Marcus recognized as a universal gesture of peace. It had grown since their last encounter. Its silver scales now showed patches of deep blue, and its eyes held an intelligence that seemed older than its apparent age. The dragon spoke in surprisingly good English. Its voice was melodic, unlike the harsh roars of adult warriors. You are the human who showed mercy. Marcus kept his rifle ready, but didn't aim it directly at the creature. How did you find me? How do you even know it was me? My people have excellent memories, the young dragon replied. I saw your face through my pain. I smelled your scent. I felt your kindness when you could have killed me. It gestured to its healed wing. I survived because of your choice. Why are you here? Marcus glanced around nervously. If his squad found him talking to the enemy, they would probably shoot them both. To warn you, the dragon said urgently. Tomorrow at dawn, my people plan to attack this position with overwhelming force. They will use nerve gas to kill everyone in this valley. You and your soldiers will not survive. Marcus stared in shock. Why would an enemy soldier warn him about an attack? This could be a trick. Why should I trust you? The young dragon stepped closer, and Marcus could see sincere emotion in its large eyes. Because you showed me that not all humans are monsters. My name is HFY, which means seeker of truth in my language. I have been watching this war, learning about your people. Most draconians believe humans are nothing but violent beasts who must be destroyed. But you're different. Marcus lowered his rifle slightly. My experience with you made me question everything I was taught, HFY explained. I began to study human culture in secret. Your art, your music, your poetry. I learned about human concepts like compassion, forgiveness, and sacrifice. These things exist among my people too, but we rarely show them to other species. The sound of footsteps made both of them freeze. Marcus quickly motioned for the young dragon to hide as Corporal Williams approached his position. Hey, Chun, you talking to someone out here? Williams peered into the darkness. Just myself, Marcus replied casually. You know how it gets on night watch. Gets lonely. Williams nodded and moved on to check the next position. When he was gone, HFY emerged from behind a large rock. You protected me again, the dragon observed, even though your people would consider me an enemy. Yeah, well, I'm starting to think this whole war might be more complicated than they tell us, Marcus admitted. So this attack tomorrow, how can I convince my squad to evacuate without revealing my source? HFY thought for a moment. Tell them you intercepted enemy communications. Say you overheard Draconian pilots discussing the gas attack while monitoring their frequencies. It was a good plan. Marcus nodded slowly. Why are you helping us? Your people are winning this war. We're just delaying the inevitable. Because I believe there might be another way, the young dragon said. What if humans and Draconians could coexist? What if we could end this war without one species destroying the other? Marcus almost laughed at the impossibility of it. You think we could have peace? After all the killing on both sides? It would take time and great effort, HFY admitted. But it must start with individuals like us proving it is possible. You spared my life when you could have taken it. I am now trying to spare yours. Perhaps others on both sides might follow our example. The conversation was interrupted by distant explosions. Another human outpost was under attack several kilometers away. Orange flames lit up the night sky, and the sound of plasma cannons echoed across the valley. I must go, HFY said. If my absence is noticed, I will be questioned. Remember, dawn tomorrow. Get your people away from here. Wait, Marcus called softly. Will I see you again? The young dragon paused at the edge of the light. Perhaps. If we both survive this war, I believe our paths will cross again. The universe has a way of bringing together those who choose compassion over hatred. With that, HFY disappeared into the darkness, moving with the silent grace of a natural predator. Marcus sat in his foxhole for a long time, processing everything that had happened. Tomorrow he would have to convince his squad to abandon their position based on information he couldn't fully explain. It would be difficult, but lives depended on it. The next morning, Marcus reported the supposed intercepted communications to Sergeant Rodriguez. After much debate and consultation with command, the decision was made to evacuate the position as a precaution. By mid-morning, all human forces had withdrawn to a secondary defensive line 5 kilometers away. At exactly dawn, just as HFY had warned, Draconian forces launched a massive attack on the abandoned position. Nerve gas canisters rained down from the sky, followed by heavy bombardment that turned the entire valley into a toxic wasteland. If the human squad had remained, they would all be dead. "Damn lucky you picked up that transmission," Rodriguez said as they watched the destruction from their new position. "Command wants to know how you managed to decode their language." "Just got lucky with the translation software," Marcus lied. "Right place, right time." That night, as he stood guard duty again, Marcus found himself thinking about HFY's words. Could there really be a path to peace? The young dragon had risked everything to save human lives, just as Marcus had once risked disciplinary action to spare a dragon's life. Maybe it was naive to hope for an end to the hatred, but perhaps somewhere in that hope lay the seed of something better. The war continued for 3 more months on Proxima Centauri before human forces were finally overwhelmed and forced to retreat. During that time, Marcus never saw HFY again, but he often wondered if the young dragon had survived the ongoing battles. As his transport ship fled toward the outer rim, Marcus watched Proxima Centauri grow smaller through the viewport. Another world lost to the Draconian Empire. Another step closer to humanity's extinction. But buried in his heart was a small spark of hope that refused to die. He didn't know it yet, but his act of mercy had planted the seeds of change that would grow over the years to come. HFY was indeed alive, and the young dragon was learning everything possible about human culture and society. More importantly, HFY was not the only Draconian questioning the necessity of genocide. The war would rage on for 7 more years. Billions would die on both sides. But the simple act of kindness between 2 young soldiers would eventually reshape the fate of entire civilizations. Sometimes the smallest choices have the greatest consequences, though those who make them rarely live to see the full impact of their decisions. Marcus Chun had no way of knowing that his moment of compassion would one day save not just his own life, but the lives of every human being in the galaxy. 5 years had passed since Marcus Chun last saw the young dragon, named HFY. The war had grown worse in ways no one thought possible. Earth was now completely occupied by Draconian forces, its remaining population enslaved in labor camps. The human resistance operated from hidden bases in the Outer Rim, launching desperate raids that barely slowed the alien advance. Marcus sat in the cramped command center of Outpost Phoenix, one of the last major human strongholds. His hair had turned gray at the temples, and deep lines marked his face. The rank insignia on his uniform showed he was now a captain, promoted through necessity as so many officers had died. Around him, holographic displays showed the grim reality of humanity's situation. "Sir, we're getting reports from the Vegas system," Lieutenant Sarah Kim announced from her console. She was young, maybe 22, with the kind of eager determination Marcus remembered having once. "The Dragons hit 3 more colonies yesterday. Complete orbital bombardment. No survivors." Marcus nodded grimly. It was the same story everywhere. The Draconian Empire had shifted from conquest to extermination. Their High Council had apparently decided that humans were too dangerous to keep alive, even as slaves. World after world was being sterilized from orbit. How many people lived in those colonies? Marcus asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Combined population of about 2 million, Kim replied quietly. "That brings the total human casualties to..." She paused to check her calculations. "Roughly 4.7 billion dead since the war began." The number hit Marcus like a physical blow. Almost half of humanity was gone. At this rate, their species would be extinct within 2 years. He thought about his sister Sarah, killed in the early bombing of Earth. At least she had died quickly, not like the millions who were starving in alien labor camps. "Sir," Lieutenant Kim was looking at him with concern. "Are you all right?" Marcus shook himself back to the present. His people needed him to stay focused, even when the situation seemed hopeless. I'm fine. What's our current strength? We have maybe 300,000 military personnel spread across all remaining bases, replied Commander Torres, his second in command. Torres was a veteran of the early war years, scarred by shrapnel and hardened by loss. Civilian population in our protected zones is down to around 2 million. 2 million humans left in a galaxy that once held 10 billion. The mathematics of genocide were simple and brutal. Marcus stared at the tactical display, showing draconian fleet movements. Red dots overwhelmingly outnumbered the few blue points representing human forces. There has to be something we can do, he muttered. Some weakness we haven't found. Sir, with respect, we've been saying that for years, Torres said gently. Maybe it's time to consider other options. Marcus knew what Torres meant. Some commanders were advocating for surrender, hoping the dragons might show mercy to a defeated enemy. Others wanted to scatter human survivors across uninhabited worlds, abandoning any hope of organized resistance. A few extremists even suggested using the prototype quantum bombs to destroy as many draconian worlds as possible before humanity died out. We're not giving up, Marcus said firmly. As long as any humans are alive, we keep fighting. An alarm chimed, and all displays suddenly shifted to show an incoming transmission. The communication officer looked puzzled as he worked his controls. Sir, we're receiving a message on an old emergency frequency. It's unusual. Put it through, Marcus ordered. The main screen flickered and resolved into an image that made Marcus's heart stop. It was HFY, though the young dragon had grown significantly in the past 5 years. The creature's silver and blue scales now showed intricate patterns that spoke of maturity and rank among its people. Its eyes held the same intelligence Marcus remembered, but now tinged with urgency. Captain Chun, HFY spoke in perfect English. I hope this message reaches you. I have been searching for your location for months. The command center erupted in shocked voices. Several officers reached for their weapons before Marcus raised his hand for silence. Lieutenant Kim stared at the screen in disbelief. Sir, it's a dragon. How does it know your name? Marcus ignored the questions around him, focusing entirely on the message from his old acquaintance. HFY continued speaking. I know this must be shocking to receive. Your people have no reason to trust any of my kind. But I bring urgent information that could save what remains of humanity. The High Council has issued final extermination orders for all human worlds. The attacks will begin in 72 hours. The command center fell deadly silent. Everyone knew the dragons were planning something big, but final extermination orders meant they intended to finish off humanity completely within days. However, HFY continued. There may still be hope. I have spent years building a resistance movement within my own people. Many draconians have grown uncomfortable with the path of total genocide. We remember when the Empire valued honor in warfare, not the slaughter of helpless civilians. Marcus leaned forward, hardly daring to believe what he was hearing. A draconian resistance movement? It seemed impossible, yet here was proof speaking directly to him. I can offer you sanctuary, the dragon explained. There is a system called Kailash, far beyond the current war zone. My allies control that region, and we can protect human refugees there while we work toward a larger solution. But you must move quickly. I will transmit coordinates after this message. The transmission paused, and HFY's expression became more personal, as if speaking directly to Marcus across the void. Captain, I know you remember our first meeting. Your mercy taught me that peace might be possible between our peoples. Now I hope to repay that kindness on a much larger scale. Trust me one more time. The message ended, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Marcus stared at the blank screen, his mind racing through implications and possibilities. Could this be real? Could there actually be dragons willing to help humanity? Sir, Commander Torres spoke carefully, this could be a trap. A way to lure our remaining forces into one location for easy destruction. I know, Marcus replied. But what choice do we have? If HFY is telling the truth about the final extermination orders, We're dead anyway if we stay here. Lieutenant Kim was studying data flowing across her screen. Sir, I'm detecting massive draconian fleet movements throughout the galaxy. It looks like they're positioning for coordinated strikes on all known human positions. The coordinates arrived as promised, along with detailed star charts showing a route to the Kailash system. Marcus studied the information carefully. The journey would take several days through dangerous space, and they would have to abandon most of their defensive positions. How many people can we evacuate? Marcus asked his staff. If we use every transport ship we have, maybe 600,000, Torres calculated. But we'd have to leave behind all our heavy equipment and most of our weapons. 600,000 out of 2 million. It wasn't enough, but it might be enough to keep humanity alive as a species. Marcus thought about all the difficult decisions he had made during this war. This might be the most important one yet. Send out evacuation orders to all human settlements, he decided. Priority goes to children, essential personnel, and anyone with critical skills for rebuilding civilization. We leave in 36 hours. Sir, what about the people we can't take? Kim asked quietly. Marcus felt the weight of command crushing down on him. We give them the coordinates too. Tell them to find their own way to Kailash if they can. Maybe some will make it in smaller ships. The next 36 hours passed in frantic activity. Transport ships that hadn't flown in years were hurriedly repaired and loaded with desperate refugees. Families were torn apart as impossible choices were made about who could leave and who had to stay behind. Children cried for parents who couldn't come with them. Parents made the ultimate sacrifice, sending their children away on ships they might never see again. Marcus walked through the loading bays, watching the exodus of his people. An elderly woman approached him, carrying a small bundle. "Captain, please," she said, "take this with you." She handed him an object wrapped in cloth. When he unwrapped it, he found an old photograph of Earth before the war. Blue oceans and green continents under white clouds. So the children will remember what home looked like. Marcus accepted the photograph with trembling hands. "I promise you, we'll find a way back." As the fleet prepared to depart, disturbing reports came in from across human space. Massive draconian battle groups were moving toward every known human settlement. The final extermination was indeed beginning, just as HFY War had warned. "Sir, long-range sensors are detecting an enormous fleet heading this way," reported the navigation officer. "At least 200 Dragon ships. They'll be here in 6 hours." "Then, we leave now," Marcus ordered. "Signal all ships to break orbit immediately." The human fleet consisted of 43 vessels of various sizes. Most were converted cargo haulers and passenger ships never designed for combat. A few military escorts provided token protection, but they would be helpless against a real draconian attack. Everything depended on reaching Kailash before being caught. As the ships jumped to hyperspace, Marcus stood on the bridge of the flagship and watched the stars streak past. Somewhere ahead lay either salvation or the final trap that would end humanity forever. Either way, they had to try. The alternative was certain death. During the long journey, Marcus found himself thinking about that first encounter with HFY War. A moment of mercy in the middle of a brutal war. Had that single decision really led to this desperate flight toward possible rescue? It seemed incredible that such small choices could have such vast consequences. "Captain," Lieutenant Kim reported from her station, "we're receiving a transmission from the Kailash system. It's from the Dragon." Marcus straightened in his command chair. "Put him through." HFY War's face appeared on the main screen, now showing clearly the patterns of a high-ranking draconian officer. Behind him, Marcus could see what looked like a massive space station. "Captain Chun, welcome to the Kailash system. I see you chose to trust me again." The dragon's expression was warm, almost relieved. "Please follow the navigation beacons to our station. We have prepared accommodations for your people." HFY War, Marcus replied. "I need to know, is this real? Can you actually protect us here?" "It is real," the dragon assured him. "We control this entire system, and we have allies throughout the Empire who are tired of senseless slaughter. You will be safe here while we work on a permanent solution. As the human fleet approached the massive station, Marcus saw something that brought tears to his eyes. Dozens of ships were docked there, and many of them appeared to be human vessels that had arrived earlier. Other refugee groups had made it to safety. You're not the only humans to receive our invitation, HFY explained, reading Marcus's expression. We have been evacuating survivors from across the galaxy. Nearly 1 million humans are now under our protection. 1 million. It wasn't the 10 billion that once lived among the stars, but it was enough to rebuild. It was hope. The docking process took several hours as the station's controllers carefully guided each human ship to a berth. As Marcus's flagship settled into its assigned spot, he could see through the windows that the station was a marvel of draconian engineering. Vast halls stretched in all directions, with artificial gravity and atmosphere systems that could support both dragon and human life. Sir, Torres said quietly, I never thought I'd live to see anything like this. Draguns alpinumans. Marcus nodded, still hardly believing it himself. Maybe there's more to this universe than we thought. A communication came through from the docking bay. Captain Shun, this is HFY. Would you join me in the central conference chamber? There is much we need to discuss about the future. As Marcus prepared to leave his ship and meet face-to-face with the dragon who had saved his people, he carried with him the old photograph of Earth. Somehow, he felt certain that this was not the end of humanity's story, but the beginning of a new chapter. The seeds of mercy planted years ago were finally bearing fruit. The central conference chamber of the Kailash station was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. The vast circular room stretched upward for several stories, with walkways and platforms at different levels to accommodate both human and draconian needs. Soft blue lighting emanated from crystalline formations embedded in the walls, creating an almost mystical atmosphere. Marcus entered the chamber accompanied by Commander Torres and Lieutenant Kim. He had chosen them both for their intelligence and level-headedness, knowing this meeting would determine the future of their species. As they walked across the polished floor, their footsteps echoed in the enormous space. At the center of the chamber, HFY waited alongside several other draconians. Marcus was struck by how the young dragon had changed since their first meeting. Where once he had seen a frightened, wounded creature, now stood a commanding presence. HFY's scales had developed intricate patterns that Marcus was learning indicated high rank and wisdom among his people. Captain Shun, HFY said, extending one clawed hand in the human gesture of greeting he had obviously learned. Thank you for coming. I know this situation must feel very strange to you. Marcus shook the dragon's hand, marveling at how carefully HFY controlled his strength. Those claws could easily tear through human flesh, yet the dragon's grip was gentle and respectful. Strange is an understatement, Marcus replied. 5 years ago, your people were trying to exterminate us. Now you're offering sanctuary. I need to understand what's really happening here. HFY gestured toward a circular table where chairs of various sizes had been arranged. As they sat down, the other draconians introduced themselves. There was Velthoron, an elderly dragon with silver scales who served as a military strategist. KYXUME was younger, with brilliant gold markings that indicated expertise in technology. The third dragon, Morinthax, had deep purple scales and was apparently some kind of cultural specialist. Before we discuss current events, I must tell you about the changes that have occurred within our empire, HFY began. Your act of mercy toward me set in motion a chain of events that has split draconian society. Marcus leaned forward, fascinated despite himself. What do you mean? When I returned from that battle where you spared my life, I was changed, HFY explained. I could not stop thinking about why a human soldier would show kindness to an enemy. It contradicted everything we had been taught about your species. Velthoron spoke up, his voice deep and resonant. Young HFY came to me with questions about human nature. As his mentor, I tried to give him proper answers according to our teachings. But His questions made me realize I had never actually studied human culture myself. What we discovered changed everything, added KYXiliuMe. We began secretly accessing human data networks, studying your literature, your art, your philosophy. We learned about human concepts like compassion, sacrifice, and redemption. Morentox nodded gravely. We found that humans and Draconians are far more similar than our leaders claimed. Both species are capable of great cruelty, but also great nobility. The decision to exterminate humanity was based on fear and misunderstanding, not fact. Marcus felt a surge of hope mixed with anger. So, you're telling me this entire war could have been avoided? Billions of people died because your empire didn't bother to understand us. Yes, ZYTH Kamor said simply. And that knowledge has torn our society apart. Roughly 40% of Draconians now oppose the extermination policy. We believe there must be another way. Commander Torres had been listening intently. What about the other 60%? They're obviously still trying to wipe us out. The High Council is controlled by the Old Guard, Velthoron explained. They see any opposition to their policies as treason. Supreme Commander Thax Morvel leads this faction. He believes that showing mercy to any species is a sign of weakness. Lieutenant Kim looked up from the tablet, where she had been taking notes. So we're caught in the middle of a draconian civil war. In a sense, yes, ZYTH Kalmor confirmed. But our faction has not yet moved to open rebellion. We hope to find a peaceful solution that does not require more bloodshed. Marcus studied the faces around the table. These dragons seemed sincere, but the stakes were too high for blind trust. What exactly are you proposing? You've saved 1 million humans, but there's still camps full of our people on occupied worlds. Are you planning to rescue all of them? That is our ultimate goal, ZYTH Kamor said, but it will require careful planning. We cannot simply attack our own people to free human prisoners. That would trigger the civil war we are trying to avoid. KYXiliuMe activated a holographic display that showed the current galactic situation. Red zones indicated areas under hardline draconian control, while blue zones showed regions where the moderate faction held influence. As you can see, we control about 30% of the Empire's territory, she explained. These systems house roughly 2 billion Draconians who support peaceful coexistence. We also have secret allies in many of the red zones. Marcus studied the display carefully. What's your plan for freeing the remaining humans? We are working on multiple approaches, Velthoron said. First, we continue evacuating survivors from worlds scheduled for extermination. Our ships have rescued over 300,000 humans in the past 6 months. Second, Morin Thax continued. We are documenting evidence of war crimes committed by the extremist faction. Many Draconians are horrified when they see what is being done in their name. And third, ZYTH Kamor added, we are trying to arrange a meeting with moderate leaders on both sides to negotiate a formal peace treaty. Torres frowned. Who are these moderate human leaders? Most of our government was killed in the early years of the war. We have been in contact with several resistance groups, ZYTH Kamor replied. Admiral Sarah Martinez commands a significant fleet near the Tau Ceti system. Colonel James Wright leads ground forces on the occupied world of Kepler, 186b. There are others scattered across human space. Marcus felt a shock run through him. Sarah Martinez? She's alive. Admiral Martinez had been his commanding officer years earlier, a brilliant strategist whom many thought had died when Earth fell. Very much alive, KYXiliuMe confirmed. She has been quite effective at disrupting draconian supply lines. Your Admiral Martinez is highly respected among my people, even our enemies. The conversation was interrupted by an urgent chiming sound. Velthoron consulted a communication device, and his expression darkened. We have a problem, he announced. Our spies report that Supreme Commander Thax Morvel has discovered the location of this station. A massive fleet is being assembled to destroy us. Marcus felt his heart sink. How long do we have? Perhaps 10 days, ZYTH Kamor replied grimly. Thax Morvel commands the largest battle group in our empire. Even with all our forces, We cannot hope to defeat him in direct combat. Lieutenant Kim looked terrified. So we run again? How many times can we keep running before there's nowhere left to go? There may be another option, Morinth Axe said slowly. But it is extremely dangerous and would require unprecedented cooperation between humans and Draconians. Marcus leaned forward. What kind of option? ZYTH Kamor exchanged glances with his companions before speaking. We have learned that Thax Morvel plans to use forbidden weapons in his attack on this station. Ancient devices that could destroy entire star systems. If we can prove he intends to use such weapons, it would turn even his supporters against him. The problem is getting that proof, Velthoron explained. We would need someone to infiltrate his flagship and document his plans. It would be a suicide mission. I'll do it, Marcus said immediately. Captain, no, Torres protested. We need you here. Marcus shook his head. This is bigger than any one person. If we can stop Thax Morvel and end this war, it's worth any risk. ZYTH Kamor looked troubled. Captain, I cannot ask you to sacrifice yourself for our cause. You have already given so much. You're not asking, Marcus replied firmly. I am volunteering. Besides, who else could get close to their fleet? They won't expect a human to infiltrate their flagship. KYXILUME activated another display showing the design of a Draconian command ship. The technical challenges are significant. You need to understand our technology, our customs, our military protocols. Teach me, Marcus said simply. Over the next 3 days, Marcus underwent intensive training in Draconian culture and technology. He learned to operate their computers, understand their language, and even mimic their body language. The dragons provided him with advanced camouflage technology that would make him appear as a low-ranking Draconian officer when viewed casually. Meanwhile, the station bustled with preparation for evacuation. If Marcus's mission failed, they would need to scatter the human refugees across multiple systems before Thax Morvel's fleet arrived. It was heartbreaking to watch families prepare to be separated again, but there was no alternative. On his last night before departing, Marcus sat alone in his quarters looking at the old photograph of Earth. Tomorrow he would attempt something that was probably impossible, but if he succeeded, it might mean the difference between extinction and survival for his species. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. ZYTH Kamor entered, carrying something wrapped in cloth. I wanted to give you this, the dragon said, unwrapping what appeared to be a ceremonial blade. The weapon was beautiful, with an edge that gleamed like captured starlight. It belonged to my ancestor, a great warrior who fought for honor rather than conquest. Perhaps it will bring you luck. Marcus accepted the blade reverently. Thank you, but I have something for you too. He handed ZYTH Kamor the photograph of Earth. If I don't make it back, make sure the children see this. Make sure they remember what we're fighting for. ZYTH Kamor studied the image carefully. It is beautiful. I understand now why humans fought so hard to defend their homeworld. Will you do something for me? Marcus asked. If this mission works, if we really can end the war, will you help us rebuild? Not just survive, but actually rebuild human civilization. Of course, ZYTH Kamor replied without hesitation. Your species deserves to flourish among the stars. We will do everything in our power to make that possible. As Marcus prepared for sleep, he thought about the strange journey that had brought him to this point. From a single moment of mercy on a battlefield to this desperate gambit that could save or doom both their species. Tomorrow would determine whether compassion could triumph over hatred, whether two different civilizations could find a way to coexist in peace. The outcome would depend on his ability to infiltrate an enemy fleet and expose a war criminal's plans. It seemed impossible, but then again, 5 years ago, the idea of dragons helping humans would have seemed equally impossible. Sometimes the greatest victories began with the smallest acts of kindness. Marcus floated in the cramped confines of the stealth pod as it drifted toward the massive Draconian fleet. Through the small viewport, he could see dozens of dragon ships arranged in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming like obsidian against the stars. At the center of the formation was Thax Morvel's flagship, a colossal vessel called the Eternal Dominion that dwarfed everything around it. The stealth pod was barely large enough for one person and had no engines or weapons. It relied entirely on advanced cloaking technology and careful trajectory calculations to avoid detection. Marcus had been drifting for 6 hours now, and his muscles ached from the cramped position, but he couldn't risk moving too much and disturbing the pod's delicate balance. His disguise was a marvel of draconian technology. The holographic projectors woven into his suit would make him appear as a low-ranking communications officer named Velkorthini. The identity had been carefully crafted by HFY Moore's allies, complete with service records and personality profiles. As long as no one looked too closely, Marcus would blend in with the thousands of crew members aboard the flagship. Beginning final approach to Docking Bay 7, he whispered into his communicator, knowing that HFY Moore's team was monitoring from extreme long range. The response was barely audible through the static. Understood. Remember, you have 8 hours before the jamming field makes communication impossible. Stay safe, old friend. Marcus smiled grimly at HFY Moore's use of human expressions. The dragon had been studying human culture for years now and had become quite fluent in colloquial speech. It was strange to think that an enemy had become such a close ally. The stealth pod bumped gently against the hull of the Eternal Dominion, guided by magnetic grapples that Kawaii had programmed to mimic routine maintenance equipment. Marcus waited 30 seconds for the ship's sensors to dismiss the contact as debris, then activated the pod's cutting laser. A small section of hull plating dissolved silently, creating an opening just large enough for him to squeeze through. He found himself in a maintenance shaft between the ship's inner and outer hulls. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows as he crawled through the narrow space, following blueprints he had memorized during his training. The ship was enormous. It would take him 20 minutes just to reach the main crew areas. As he crawled, Marcus thought about the mission parameters. According to Draconian intelligence, Thax Morvel was planning to use ancient weapons called Star Killers in his attack on the Kailash station. These devices could destabilize a star and destroy an entire solar system, killing billions of beings in the process. Even hardline Draconians would turn against him if they knew he planned such massive destruction. The challenge was finding proof. Marcus needed to access Thax Morvel's personal command center and record evidence of the Star Killer deployment. The Supreme Commander was paranoid about security, so getting close would require perfect timing and enormous luck. After what felt like hours, Marcus reached an access panel leading to the ship's main corridors. He activated his disguise and checked his appearance in a small mirror. Where once stood a human, now appeared a young Draconian officer with green scales and nervous yellow eyes. The hologram even included subtle movements like gill flutter and tail twitching that would mark him as appropriately anxious for a junior officer. He opened the access panel and stepped into a bustling corridor filled with Draconian crew members going about their duties. No one gave him a second glance as he joined the flow of traffic, walking with a slightly hunched posture that indicated low rank among dragons. The flagship's interior was a study in brutal efficiency. Dark metal walls were decorated with carvings that depicted Draconian conquests throughout history. The air carried the metallic scent that dragons preferred, and the temperature was slightly higher than humans found comfortable. Marcus tried to ignore his discomfort and focus on navigation. Following the mental map he had studied, he made his way toward the command levels. Several times he had to show his forged identification to security checkpoints, but the holographic identity held up under casual scrutiny. The guards were more interested in watching for external threats than checking every crew member. As he rode a lift toward the upper decks, Marcus found himself standing next to a group of Draconian officers discussing their mission. Their conversation was both enlightening and terrifying. The Supreme Commander grows impatient, one officer was saying. He wants a human infestation ended permanently this time. About time, another replied. We should have used the Star Killers years ago instead of wasting time with conventional weapons. Marcus felt his blood run cold. They were talking about the forbidden weapons openly, which meant Thax Morvell's plans were well advanced. He needed to get evidence quickly before it was too late. The lift stopped at Deck 12, and Marcus stepped out into a corridor that led to the ship's primary command center. This area was more heavily guarded, with checkpoints every 50 meters and patrol drones floating silently through the air. Getting past this security would require more than just a holographic disguise. He ducked into a supply closet and activated a small device KYXLUME had given him. The device interfaced with the ship's computer network and began uploading a sophisticated virus that would gradually disable security systems. The process would take about an hour, giving Marcus time to scout the area. Moving carefully through maintenance passages, he made his way closer to Thax Morvell's private command chamber. Through a ventilation grate, he could hear voices discussing tactical plans. One voice dominated the conversation, deep, commanding, and filled with the kind of authority that came from absolute power. "Deploy the Star Killers at these coordinates," the voice was saying. "I want the Kalash system completely destroyed. Every planet, every moon, every asteroid. Nothing must survive to harbor human refugees." Marcus activated his recording equipment and pressed closer to the grate. Through the slats, he could see Supreme Commander Thax Morvell himself, a massive dragon with black scales that seemed to absorb light. The creature stood before a holographic display showing the Kalash system, with targeting data highlighting each celestial body. "Sir," another voice said hesitantly, "the Star Killers have been forbidden since the ancient wars. Using them would violate every treaty our people have signed." Thax Morvell turned toward the speaker with predatory grace. "Treaties signed by weaklings who feared to use our full power. The human infestation must be burned out completely, along with any draconian traitors who harbor them. But, sir, there are 2 billion loyal citizens and systems adjacent to Kalash. The stellar radiation from Star Killer detonation could dash. The sound of violence cut off the protest. Through the grate, Marcus saw the speaking officer collapse, clutching his throat where Thax Morvell's claws had struck. The Supreme Commander stepped over the body and continued as if nothing had happened. "Does anyone else wish to question my orders?" The remaining officers shook their heads quickly. "Good. We deploy the Star Killers in 6 hours. The human plague ends today, along with this foolish notion of peaceful coexistence." Marcus continued recording as Thax Morvell outlined his complete plan. The Supreme Commander intended to use 3 Star Killers to destabilize the Kalash system's primary star, creating a supernova that would sterilize dozens of neighboring systems. The attack would kill every human refugee, along with Zitij Kamor's moderate faction and billions of innocent draconians in nearby systems. The recording equipment captured everything: deployment orders, targeting coordinates, and Thax Morvell's explicit intention to commit genocide on an unprecedented scale. This was exactly the evidence needed to turn the entire empire against him. But as Marcus prepared to retreat with his prize, disaster struck. An alarm began blaring throughout the ship, and red emergency lighting bathed the corridors. His virus had been detected faster than expected, triggering lockdown protocols that sealed all access routes. "Security alert," announced a mechanical voice. "Unauthorized intrusion detected on Deck 12. All personnel report to stations. Initiate full sensor sweep." Marcus heard footsteps approaching the ventilation grate. In seconds, patrol drones would begin scanning every compartment and passage. His holographic disguise might fool casual observation, but it wouldn't survive detailed sensor analysis. He made a desperate decision. Rather than trying to hide, he dropped down from the ventilation system directly into the command chamber. The remaining officers turned in shock as a supposed junior communications officer crashed to the floor in front of them. "Intruder!" one shouted, reaching for his weapon. Marcus rolled aside as energy blasts scorched the floor where he had landed. His disguise was already flickering as the holographic projectors overloaded from the impact. The dragons could see human features bleeding through the false appearance. Fax Morvel stared at him with mixture of rage and fascination. A human spy aboard my flagship? How deliciously audacious. The Supreme Commander's voice carried genuine amusement along with deadly menace. I assume you heard our conversation about the Star Killers? Marcus climbed to his feet, knowing that any pretense was useless now. I heard enough to know you're a monster, even by your own people's standards. Monster? Fax Morvel laughed, a sound like grinding stone. I'm the salvation of a galaxy. Your species is a cancer that must be cut out completely. The Star Killers will burn away this infection once and for all, including billions of your own people, Marcus pointed out. How many draconian families live in the systems you're planning to destroy? For a moment, uncertainty flickered across the Supreme Commander's features. Necessary sacrifices for the greater good. The Empire will survive and grow stronger. Marcus saw his chance and pressed the attack. Will it? Or will history remember you as the butcher who destroyed half the galaxy out of fear and hatred? Enough. Tox Morvel roared. Kill him. But before the guards could fire, explosions rocked the ship. Emergency alarms added to the chaos as the lights flickered and died. In the confusion of smoke and flashing warning lights, Marcus dove behind a command console just as energy blasts filled the air where he had been standing. Through the tactical displays, he could see what was happening outside. HFY Comor's fleet had arrived early, launching a desperate attack on the Draconian formation. The moderate dragons were outnumbered 10-1, but they were fighting with the fury of beings defending everything they believed in. Sir, one of Fax Morvel's officers called out. The rebels are transmitting something on all frequencies. It appears to be recordings of your conversation here. Marcus grinned in the darkness. His recording equipment had been linked to the ship's communication system through KYX-Silume's virus. Even though he was trapped, the evidence of Fax Morvel's plans was already spreading across the Empire. The Supreme Commander's roar of rage shook the entire chamber. Outside, Marcus could see Draconian ships breaking away from the formation as their commanders received the broadcast. The proof of planned genocide was turning the fleet against itself, just as HFY Comor had hoped. But Marcus was still trapped in a room full of enemies, and the battle for the future of two species was just beginning. The command chamber of the Eternal Dominion had become a war zone. Emergency lighting cast wild shadows as Fax Morvel's officers scrambled to respond to the crisis unfolding around them. Outside the massive viewport, the Draconian fleet was tearing itself apart as ship after ship received Marcus's broadcast and turned against their Supreme Commander. Marcus crouched behind an overturned command console, listening to the chaos of voices on the communication channels. Across the Empire, Draconian commanders were expressing shock and horror at Fax Morvel's plan to use Star Killers. Even hardline officers who had supported the war against humanity were refusing to participate in genocide on such a massive scale. Sir, one of the remaining loyal officers called out to Fax Morvel. Admiral Korth Sandvel's battle group has broken away from formation. They're demanding your immediate surrender. The Supreme Commander's response was a roar of pure rage that made the metal walls ring. Traitors, they dare question my authority. His massive form moved through the smoke-filled chamber like a predator stalking prey. Find that human spy and bring me his head. Marcus pressed himself deeper into cover as energy blasts seared the air above him. He still carried the ceremonial blade HFY Comor had given him, but it would be useless against armed dragons in a direct fight. His only advantage was the confusion of the battle raging outside. Through the viewport, he could see HFY Comor's flagship engaging 3 enemy vessels at once. The moderate dragon was proving to be a brilliant tactician, using the larger ship's size against them in a deadly dance among the stars. But even his skill couldn't overcome such overwhelming numbers forever. Captain Shun, a familiar voice whispered through his earpiece. The communication link had somehow re-established itself amid all the electronic chaos. Can you hear me? HFY Comor. Marcus whispered back. How are you reaching me? Our virus is still active in their system. I'm using it to maintain contact. The dragon's voice was strained with effort. Listen carefully. We've located the Star Killers. They're in the ship's main armory, 3 decks below your position. Can you reach them? Marcus looked around the command chamber. Thax Morvell's forces were systematically searching for him, and it was only a matter of time before they found his hiding spot. Getting to the armory would mean fighting through the entire ship. I could try, he replied. But what good will it do? I can't exactly disarm ancient superweapons by myself. You don't need to disarm them, HFY explained. Just damage their targeting systems. Without precise coordinates, the weapons will be useless. An explosion rocked the ship, throwing several dragons off their feet. Through the smoke, Marcus saw his chance. A maintenance hatch had been torn open by debris, offering a route back into the ventilation system. He sprinted from cover, diving through the opening just as energy blasts scorched the wall behind him. There! Thax Morvell's voice boomed. He's in the vents. Flood them with poison gas. Marcus crawled frantically through the narrow passages as toxic fumes began filling the air behind him. His breathing apparatus could filter out most toxins, but not indefinitely. He needed to reach the armory quickly before the gas overwhelmed his equipment. The ship's layout was a maze of corridors and chambers, made worse by the ongoing battle damage. Several times, Marcus had to backtrack when passages were blocked by debris or sealed by emergency systems. The sounds of fighting echoed through the hull as more ships joined the rebellion against Thax Morvell. Finally, he dropped through another access hatch into a corridor near the main armory. The area was surprisingly quiet, with most of the crew either fighting the rebels or hunting for him in other parts of the ship. But as he approached the armory entrance, he found it heavily defended by automated systems and energy barriers. The defenses are too strong, he reported to HFY. I can't get through. Wait, the dragon replied. I'm accessing their security grid now there. The barriers are down for 30 seconds. Move. Marcus sprinted through the disabled defenses and into the armory itself. The chamber was vast, filled with weapons and equipment spanning centuries of draconian warfare. At the center, on a raised platform, sat 3 objects that made his blood run cold. The Star Killers were smaller than he had expected, each about the size of a human shuttle. But something about their smooth, dark surfaces suggested incredible power held in check. Ancient symbols covered their hulls, and they hummed with barely contained energy that made the air itself feel dangerous. I'm here, Marcus reported, but I don't know how to damage the targeting systems. The control interface should be at the base of each weapon. HFY guided him. Look for crystalline structures that glow with blue light. Marcus found the interfaces exactly as described. Each Star Killer had a complex array of crystals that pulsed with energy, connected by conduits that probably carried targeting data. He pulled out a small explosive charge from his equipment kit and placed it against the first array. Before he could arm the device, alarms began screaming throughout the armory. Heavy footsteps echoed in the corridor outside as security forces converged on his location. He had been discovered. The armory doors burst open as Thax Morvell himself entered, flanked by a dozen heavily armed guards. The Supreme Commander's black scales seemed to drink in the light, and his eyes blazed with fury that promised painful death. Step away from those weapons, human, Thax Morvell commanded. You have caused enough damage to my empire. Marcus kept his hands on the explosive device, but didn't activate it yet. Your empire is destroying itself. I just showed them what kind of monster you really are. Monster? The dragon advanced slowly, claws extended. I am evolution in action. The strong survive, the weak perish. Your species had the chance to submit peacefully, but you chose resistance. Now you face extinction. Not just humans, Marcus pointed out. Your own people are dying in this battle because they refuse to follow a madman. How many draconian families will you sacrifice for your hatred? Thax Morvell paused, and for a moment uncertainty flickered across his features. They don't understand the necessity. Sometimes a leader must make hard choices that others cannot comprehend. Like murdering billions of your own citizens? Marcus pressed. That's not leadership. That's madness. The Supreme Commander's composure cracked completely. Silence. You know nothing of leadership, nothing of the burden of command. His voice rose to a thunderous roar. I have fought for 3 centuries to build this empire. I will not watch it contaminated by alien weakness. Marcus saw something in that outburst that gave him hope. Fax Morvel wasn't just evil. He was afraid. Afraid that his empire was changing, afraid that his people were evolving beyond the need for conquest and hatred. The recordings had shown other dragons that there was another way, and that terrified him more than any weapon. You're not fighting to save the empire, Marcus realized. You're fighting to stay relevant. Your people are growing beyond you, and you can't stand it. Enough! Fax Morvel lunged forward with deadly speed. Marcus activated the explosive charge and dove aside as the Supreme Commander's claws raked the air where he had been standing. The blast destroyed the first Star Killer's targeting system in a shower of sparks and crystal fragments. But now he was trapped between Fax Morvel and the armed guards. The dragon's massive form blocked any escape route, and those deadly claws were reaching for him again. Then, the armory's main door exploded inward as HFY Komor burst through, followed by a squad of moderate draconian soldiers. The young dragon had grown into a formidable warrior, moving with lethal grace as he engaged Fax Morvel's guards. Captain, HFY Komor called out. Complete your mission. Marcus rolled toward the second Star Killer and attached another explosive to its targeting array. Energy blasts from the firefight scorched the air around him as the 2 dragon factions battled for control of the armory. Fax Morvel turned from his duel with HFY Komor and backhanded Marcus across the chamber. The human crashed into a weapons rack, feeling ribs crack from the impact. But he kept hold of his final explosive charge and struggled toward the 3rd Star Killer. You cannot stop destiny, human. Fax Morvel roared. Even if you destroy these weapons, there are others. The war will continue until your species is ash. Marcus reached the final targeting system and placed the charge, but before he could activate it, Fax Morvel's claws closed around his throat. The dragon lifted him off the ground, applying pressure that would crush his windpipe in seconds. Your mercy toward this whelp was the beginning of our downfall. Fax Morvel snarled, glancing at HFY Komor. But I will finish what should have been done years ago. Through his fading vision, Marcus saw HFY Komor break free from combat and sprint toward them. But he would be too late. With his last breath, Marcus managed to gasp out a single word. Mercy! He triggered the final explosive charge. The blast destroyed the 3rd targeting system and also ruptured power conduits throughout the chamber. Electricity arced between the damaged Star Killers as their containment fields failed. The ancient weapons were still intact, but without targeting systems, they were as harmless as any other piece of debris. Fax Morvel dropped Marcus and stared in horror at the ruined weapons. No, you don't understand what you've done. Without these weapons, we cannot guarantee victory. Perhaps, HFY Komor said, approaching his former commander with weapon drawn, victory is less important than honor. The Supreme Commander turned to face his subordinate, black scales rippling with rage. Honor? You speak of honor while consorting with aliens and traitors. I speak of honor learned from an enemy who showed mercy when he could have killed. HFY Komor replied. Captain Shun taught me that strength comes from compassion, not hatred. Through the armory's viewports, the results of that lesson were visible across space. Nearly 2/3 of the Draconian fleet had joined the rebellion. Ships that had been trying to kill each other minutes earlier were now coordinating rescue efforts for damaged vessels. The war was ending not with victory for either side, but with understanding. Fax Morvel looked around at his crumbling command and seemed to deflate. You have doomed us all. Without total victory, both species will eventually destroy each other. No, Marcus said weakly, struggling to his feet. Both species will learn to build something better together. The fighting in the armory had stopped. Fax Morvel's guards were laying down their weapons and surrendering to the moderate forces. Through the communication system, reports were coming in from across the fleet. The rebellion was succeeding beyond all expectations. Admiral Korth-Sanvel's voice echoed through the ship's speakers. "This is Admiral Korth-Sanvel to all vessels. Supreme Commander Thax Morvel is relieved of command for crimes against the Empire and violations of the laws of war. All hostilities against human forces will cease immediately." Thax Morvel closed his eyes and seemed to age years in seconds. "Then it is finished. My empire is dead." "No," Zyth Kamor said gently. "Your empire is being reborn as something worthy of honor." 3 months later, Marcus stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed peace station, watching human and Draconian ships working together to build a permanent settlement in the Kalash system. The war was officially over, ended by treaty rather than conquest. It would take years to heal all the wounds, but the process had begun. Zyth Kamor joined him at the viewport, now wearing the insignia of the Draconian Peace Council. "The first group of human refugees will be returning to Earth next week," he reported. "Our construction crews have been working to repair the damage." Marcus smiled. "Thank you for everything." "I should be thanking you," the dragon replied. "Your mercy changed not just my life, but the course of history. A single act of kindness saved 2 civilizations." Looking out at the stars, Marcus thought about all the lives that had been lost during the war. Sarah, his sister, billions of humans, and Draconians who would never see this new age of cooperation. But their sacrifice had not been meaningless if it led to something better for future generations. "Do you think it will last?" Marcus asked. "This peace between our peoples?" Zyth Kamor considered the question carefully. "It will not be easy. There are those on both sides who still harbor hatred. But I believe the seeds of understanding have been planted. With time and care, they will grow into something beautiful." A new ship was arriving at the station, carrying the first mixed crew of humans and Draconians assigned to joint exploration missions. They would travel together to distant stars, seeking new worlds and new possibilities. The age of war was ending, and the age of exploration was about to begin. Marcus touched the ceremonial blade at his side, the one Zyth Kamor had given him before his desperate mission. It would remain with him always, a reminder that even the smallest acts of mercy could change the universe. Sometimes the greatest victories came not from defeating enemies, but from transforming them into friends.